Hello. Hello, my name is Joe Stegman. I'm here to talk about WPFE. I'll be spending about 45 minutes doing a quick overview. It'll mostly be demos, though, and then I'll get on to the Q&A after that. So really, the session agenda is mostly focused on points 2 and 4 there, which is demos, and do a little bit of overview talking and fill it up a little bit with some more words. But mostly, I just want to kind of show you. Thank you. I mostly, as my mom, mostly want to focus on demos and kind of show you what we've got working today. So first of all, a couple questions for the audience. How many people in here consider themselves web designers? I can barely see, but nobody's raising their hands, so not many. It looks like I see one, thank you. How about web developers? Mostly web developers. How about business decision makers or technology decision makers? Okay, a few more of those than designers. All right, I'm going to be, as I said, mostly talking about demos, but one thing, or mostly doing demos, but one thing I do want to do up front is I want to talk a little bit about WPF and how it relates to WPFE. Has everybody here seen the WPF demos? Yeah, everybody seen it? So how many people think that WPFE requires some or all of WPF in order to run? Just a few hands? There, I see a few. So one thing I want to clarify is that it doesn't. They're actually separate technologies. What they share is they share a common ecosystem. What that means is that the WPFE implementation and the WPF implementation, they're separate, but they do share things such as a common XAML format. They do share a common programming model. But ultimately, the targets of the two technologies is different. One's a rich client technology, and one's a web technology. But again, they share this common ecosystem. They allow people to say, hey, you know, I can be a client developer, use my client tools, but I can use those same tools and my same technology skill set to develop rich web apps. So we wanted to make sure that we built this ecosystem that was common between these two different technologies, and that's really what we're after with WPFE. But again, to be clear, it really isn't, or it's not dependent in any way on WPF. It's a separate install, separate runtime. And our goals really are, great, other than making sure that we build into this WPF ecosystem. Our goals really are to have great integration with the web experience and what most of you as web developers are used to today. And that's really what I'll be demoing. I'll be talking a lot about that. We don't have bits to give out at the conference, unfortunately. However, we will have a CTP Q3 of this year. We'll have our web release, or when I say web release, what that means is the web portion of WPFE will have a release in about a year, first half of 2007, and then we're also going to follow up with the device release sometime after that, which is the second half of 2007. And an architecture slide, if people were in the WPF session yesterday, Michael Wallant talked about this a little bit, but really this is just kind of showing you the components or pieces that go up into, or that make up WPF. The most important thing is the bottom, a runtime, which is really composed of this core UI and rendering engine. And what's really different about this, which is it's similar or it's the same as WPF, but it's what separates it from other technology is really unifying framework for being able to handle things such as text and imaging and controls and animations, all in the same framework. So mostly, I'm going to get on to demos from here on out. And let's see if I can get this switched over. Oop, go to sleep. Hello? Come back. There we go. Okay, going to start off with plain old web page. And currently this starts out with, let's see, a blank page. Can't be right. Set as the start page. Here we go. So I just want to take you through sort of the experience. I'm going to start off at the very beginning. Twice in a row. What's with that? Oh, I think it's coming. Nope, look at that. Can't even get off the ground. It gets better, trust me. It gets better. We'll just try view in browser. Come on. There we go. It's coming. Blank page. Trust me. Page is going to come up with an image as a background. I'll just talk over it. So what I want to do is I just want to start out and say, hey, my first experience with WPFE, there it is. There's no WPFE on here. That's a real picture. Plain web page. What I want to do is take you through the experience of adding WPFE to a page. And I'm going to start off at the most basic level. And that is, first of all, I have some XAML. What is XAML? It's just some markup that allows me to describe my UI. I want to basically take that XAML and have it displayed on a web page. The first thing I need to do that is I need some way to get our runtime on that web page or running on the web page. And the way I do that, if standard web developer may know, is through an object tag. And so again, this is sort of the hello world, just basic, here's how the technology works. And I'm going to start, rather than typing it in, because it can get cumbersome, especially when I have to do an object and embed tag, and I don't actually have our CLSID memorized if you're doing an object tag. So I'm going to be dragging over some of these things. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and run it and explain what this does. So what you get here is I have an object tag. The object tag says, hey, they want to install a plugin. It's a one-time install. I'll go ahead and say yes. And it'll go ahead and install our plugin. But what will happen is, and right now it's less than a meg in size, and we don't expect it to grow much more than twice that by the time we release. Right now I have nothing. I'm not rendering any content, but just wanted to show you that's sort of the initial experience of how do you get our plugin actually on the page. Now we'll hook it up to some XAML. Now one thing I am going to do here is I'm going to, I just actually updated our plugin. I have a set of, just for full disclosure, I have my cab file here that does the install, but it's actually contains some older bits. I've got some more recent bits, and I just updated my runtime with more recent bits there. So next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and connect it to some XAML, and I'll show you sort of the most basic way to do this. I'm going to add, again, I'm going to drag over some script, and all I've done here, the most important part of what I've done is I've added this right here, which is some XAML directly in my page. It displays a canvas. You can just think of a canvas as really a surface that allows me to absolutely position things. And on my surface, anybody familiar with SVG out there? A few people? I'm actually drawing vectors here. In this case, I'm drawing a path, but it really doesn't matter. I'm just drawing a box on it. Now, in general, you look at this and you say, you know, most people, they probably wouldn't want to actually type this out, although we do have an IntelliSense experience if you want to do that. That's why we have a full set of tools that support this, which is the expression suite. But again, I'm just trying to take you through, I want you to understand at a fundamental level how this works. So I've gone ahead and I've embedded that XML XAML directly on my page. And now the only thing I need to do is I need to tell my object tag to go ahead and load that XAML that I just put on my page. And the way I do this is I tell it, hey, by the way, go get your XAML from a source element called XAML, which is what I've named this script block up here. So let's go ahead and run that. And there you have it. So I have a most basic sample here. I'm now hosting our runtime on the web browser. Within that hosted control, I've then instantiated that XAML you just saw, which displays a little purple square. And the purple square is opaque. So next thing I want to do is just take you one step further. I really would like that to work windowless. All that means is let's go ahead and run it again so that I can now see it. You can barely see it. I know it's not the best picture, but it's actually opaque. I'm now running it so you can actually see through our control and directly onto the background. And now just to give you a quick intro before I go into a little more talking, I just want to show you a few more capabilities of the system, which is we are this stack that supports vectors or 2D as well as animations. And so I just want to throw a little bit of that in there. And I'm going to go ahead and put a second box in here. And what I've done different about this second box is I've filled it here in markup with a gradient brush. So one of the great things about XAML, WPF, and WPFE is it's got this really rich and powerful model for, especially with brushes. I can take and create, in this case, I can create a solid color brush or a gradient brush, but I can also do really interesting things like create video brushes. In this case, I just have a gradient brush on the second box, and just to make it do something besides just show a couple boxes, we'll go ahead and add a little animation here as well. So that's what I've done here. And again, in this case, I just added a couple animations, and all they do is animate the XY positions. And let's go ahead and run that. And it's likely you generate that from a tool, but just I got two opaque boxes floating around the screen. And as you can see, they're both, as they get, or not opaque, but 50% transparent boxes. And they're transparent to the background, animating at different frequencies, bouncing around. Fairly simple, fairly simplistic demo, but again, just to kind of show you the core capabilities of what the system can do. Now, this is in IE, of course. Whoa, not what I wanted. I don't know. How did I get that many C's in there? Not sure. Okay. That's not me. Okay, who did this? Who wanted me to fail today? Mom, is it you? It's just a joke, really. I'm going back to my main box. I don't know what's going on. We'll fix it. It's all okay. Sorry about let's go back, do it again. It was as if someone was pressing on my C key. Okay, bring it up again. There we go, much better this time around. Nope. Wow. That's weird. Okay, unplug. It actually, okay. It was something to do with, okay, we'll get there. It was the, I had to unplug the USB thing that hooked up the mouse. So I don't know why that was causing it. Sorry about that. So let's go ahead. I was going to show you this running in Firefox. Here we go. Just to show you it does run in Firefox. So this is using a Netscape plugin in this case, as it comes up here. And hello. While we're doing that, oh, look at that. What did I do? I'll come back to that, and I'm going to show it here running on the Mac. Let's see which one is the Mac. Laptop must be D. Okay, now I'm running on a Mac here. Same thing. I've got the same little app running over here. Double click. And there you see, and this, I didn't set the background in this case, but again, just wanted to show you real quickly that we have this whole thing running currently cross-platform. I will come back to the Firefox spot here in a minute. But I do want to add a little more interactivity to this. So another thing I want to touch on quickly is I want to show our programming model. So what I've done so far is I've got a couple boxes that bounce along the screen. So I do want to show that you can also add a little JavaScript-based programming to program against those elements. And now I'm sorry that thing was, I'm going to have to go back and forth between keyboards to get this to work now. So sorry about that. And I want to go ahead and drag in some couple buttons, and I'm going to drag some script in associated with those buttons. And this is some JavaScript. And what I'm doing here is I'll go ahead and run it, and then I'll explain what it does. So what I've done here is I've got something that allows me to change the color of one of the boxes floating around, as well as I can change the speed of one of the boxes floating around. And this says make it 1 hour. It'll move across the screen now with the rate of 1 hour, so it doesn't look like it's moving, but it's actually moving slowly across the screen, or I could speed it up the other way and say, make it 1 second, and it'll move quickly across there. Again, go back to an hour. That's kind of my session timer here. But again, I've added some simple interactivity to this, and how did I do that? And just to show you, the programming model is pretty straightforward. If you're familiar with the standard DOM-based programming model, you'll find this real familiar. So I added a button down at the bottom, and I have it hooked up to a function called change color when I click on it. And if I go look at change color, all it does is it gets my hosted control, and then it's sort of, we have this DOM within a DOM concept, where what it does here is it just goes ahead and queries our tree, the WPF tree, to start getting elements, and the elements that are returned you can then script against. So if I go ahead and take a look at the XAML, you'll see this is getting an element named box. And if I go down and look at the XAML, you see I have a named element in here, which is the purple box, and it's named box. So all I'm really doing is kind of going the equivalent, if you're familiar with JavaScript, doing a get element by ID, equivalent of that, but going against our DOM, returning the object, which returns something that you can then program against in JavaScript. And I'm programming against that to change its color by calling, in this case, I'm calling a set value on it to set the fill to the color that I've set in the box. Down below, I'm doing the same thing, only this time I'm animating or changing the speed, which in the XAML, that is an animation that I'm programming against. But again, what we really tried to do here was, here's the animation that I'm programming against. In this case, I'm changing the duration of the animation. I'm changing the time at which it runs. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that we unified our markup model with the JavaScript web programming model. So with that, we'll get back to slides. So I showed this running on, well, I showed it on Windows and Mac, although I didn't get back to Firefox. I have some other demos that I will show in Firefox, but we will be supporting Win2K and above. We'll support MIX06. From the Microsoft standpoint, we are implementing those platforms. It says considering Linux and Solaris, but we will do Linux and Solaris versions. What we will do is we'll partner with folks to get those versions ported over. From the standpoint of Win9X, how many people in here target Win9X platforms for their web development? Is anybody raising their hand? I can't see. Somebody? One person? Okay, it's good data. And then, from my standpoint, of course, for browsers, we're targeting, we won't ship if we don't support the standard, i.e. Mozilla, Firefox, Opera, and Safari. That's just our minimum bar. We have to support that or we won't ship. And then one of the things I was talking about before was that the great thing is we have this really great unified framework. We basically have our core runtime treats things such as 2D and vectors. And I'll do some demos later on that kind of show the power of vectors. But we treat 2D and text and media and imaging and animations all as first-class citizens within our framework. What that means is that I can treat video and use the same markup in a sense to define video or controls, and then I can animate those all in the same way using the same framework. So it's a really powerful unified framework, and as I was saying before, that means I can take something like video and I can make a brush out of it, and then I can paint my text with that video brush. Just some really powerful concepts that come by unifying this framework. We'll also support accessibility, and we have, of course, input and eventing. We'll have a set of core controls, buttons, and radio buttons, those sorts of things. And we'll have basic layout. And what we're thinking for layout for V1, and we'd love your feedback on it, is we're thinking we'll do a grid-type layout, the canvas layout, which I just showed, which is absolute positioning, and we'll also do a stack-type layout, so sort of a menu kind of layout. One of the big advantages to us being based off XAML is it does allow us to share this ecosystem with WPF. We basically can share the same file format, which is really great. And the other thing that's really great about that is it allows a clean separation between what a developer does and what a designer does. And my next demo, I'm going to touch on that a little bit and show how that works. But in a sense, it's really great in that a designer and design tools, all they need to do is output XAML, and the developer can take in the XAML and program against it. But it gives us really nice separation between the two technologies. And not only do we have a set of tools that support XAML, but there are also a set of third-party tools already that support this format. So we think that's a big value add for being able to support or to basically standardize on this XAML format for us. And this is a slide, I think a couple people have shown this around in a couple sessions that I've been in, but it's basically the standard designer developer workflow, which is a designer designs something pretty, and me as being a former developer, you know, to me pretty is different than what a designer calls pretty. Rounded corners, square corners, I don't know to me, but to designers that makes a huge difference. And so what typically happens in that process is a designer designs something that looks very nice, and somewhere the developer designs something that doesn't look as nice. And so XAML is great in a sense, and it allows the designer to maintain full fidelity of their designs, and then the developer to work off of that, and vice versa. So the developer can easily create mock-ups in XAML, and then turn around, give that to the designer. They can make them pretty and turn around and give them back. So it just makes for a really nice workflow. And we have a set of products, as I said, that work on these, as well as there are third parties that support XAML as well. And so with that, I'm going to get on to another set of demos here. Nope. There we go. And I want to start with just a simple little clock demo. Everybody's seen there's all kinds of clocks around. The first thing I think anybody does with any sort of technology is they build a clock out of it, so we had to do the same. I've got a blank. That's not it. The last demo I showed, we'll set this as a start page to save some time. I've got a blank page here that just does the same background that you saw before. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with by showing some other integration we have, and this is integration with ASP.NET. Now, everything I've showed so far does not require Microsoft Web Servers, doesn't require Microsoft tools. Although I'm editing this in Visual Studio, I could be using Notepad just as well. I do need the IntelliSense because I'm not as good as Notepad as others are. But all of our tools and technologies that I'm going to show, for the most part, can be run on any server, anywhere. I'm now going to show you ASP.NET integration, but again, we don't require you to use these tools in order to use our technology. This just makes it a little easier to consume or to create WPFE controls or to use WPFE content. So here I'm going to go ahead and drop in a WPFE control, and this is an ASP.NET control, and I'm going to go ahead and just drop it on the page. And what this allows me to do is, it basically, behind the scenes, what it does, oh, I know what's wrong with my Firefox demo now. I didn't put an embed tag in there. Just hit me. Sorry about that. Jeez. Surprised someone in the audience didn't catch that. I will. That's one of the beauties of this control, is that it automatically injects JavaScript into the page, and it does the object tag if I'm on IE, and it does the embed tag if I'm on Firefox. So here I can give it a XAML file, and I'm going to give it clock.xaml, and I'll show you that file in a minute. I want to run it windowless, and I'm going to go ahead and make it transparent. And again, we'll just pull this over the screen here. And let me just show you clock.xaml. So this is a tool that, or some XAML that was developed in the design tool. And here's the XAML for it. Not all that interesting, but the most interesting thing is that this is what you see. So I'm going to go ahead and what I've done here is I've hooked up that web page to go ahead and display that XAML using our control. And I'll go ahead and run it. And that is not the version that I wanted to show. So, sorry about that. I noticed this earlier, so we'll go ahead and we'll do this slightly different way. What I can do is I can go ahead and take the markup in here, in this, the XAML associated with this, and I'm going to go ahead and grab it. And I'm going to start a slightly different route, and I'm going to go into our design tool here and show you the markup in the design tool. And what I'm using here is Interactive Designer. And I just took the XAML that we were going to use, or what I was going to render using WPF, and I'm going to start with a slightly different approach here, which is I'm going to go ahead and design it in here, just show you kind of how the workflow might work, and just pick some different colors than what I just showed. We'll go ahead and that looks good there. And let's see, pink's probably pretty good as well, so we'll take that. There on the second gradient. Now, how about some red? Yeah, that looks good. I think that looks really well styled, in my opinion. Put that on my web page. I was serious. Okay, and I'll go ahead and just so you guys see that it's I'm just going to go ahead and paste it directly into the text here. There it is, and I'll go ahead and run it. And there we go. So that's my updated one, just to show you that. So all that means is that it's really easy for me to have my designer go off and create some content. I can take the markup from that content, and I can actually take that same file that they've produced, and I can use it directly in my application. Now, one thing that you'll notice about this at this point in time is that if you look at it, it's not setting the correct time. It isn't 12 o'clock. And while I am here, we're going to go ahead and try the Firefox demo again, since this should work. And so I just grab the same web page, display it in Firefox. Since I'm using the control, it'll correctly put in the embed tag in there. And there you go. There's the same thing running in Firefox. This time it really did work. And next thing I want to show is I do have, what I want to do here is I showed you the clock. And what I'd really like to do is I'd like to be able to set the time of the clock. Now, in order to slightly over-engineer the problem, somebody that I work with created an Atlas web service that returns the time. So why don't I just hook my control up to the Atlas web service to get the current time and then set it. So effectively, that's what I've got here, is I've got the clock.xaml. I just jumped to a different solution, so I'm looking at the old XAML, but I could easily go in there and change this XAML as well and update that. But here's the XAML, and I've got basically a web page that has, if you can see here, it's just using an Atlas gadget on it that talks to a web service that I've running locally that will basically get the time for me. And I've written some JavaScript, and this, again, is the advantage of our programming model. I can now write some JavaScript that goes off, talks to that web service, gets the current time, and then hooks it up to our control. And so what this looks like is the following. Go ahead and select a city. We'll say Chicago. And then you'll see I get the nice fade-in effect. That's another little addition in this sample, but that's the same clock. But now here it is going ahead and talking to a web service. And again, that's just the simplicity of being able to take technologies like Atlas, which is JavaScript-based, or any of your AJAX frameworks, and be able to use them against our programming model, or one of our programming models, which is the JavaScript programming model. It just makes it makes it easy to marry those two technologies. Okay, and I'm going to go back to my other demo here, and I'll show you a couple other demos. So I've got a demo here of some vectors. We'll do the same thing here. We'll view this now. If you look at that, it may look like an image. And what that actually is we're looking at vectors. This was exported from Illustrator, but this is a very large XAML file. And it's right here. And you'll see here's the view in the Visual Studio. It will give you a nice little view of it as well. But here's the XAML for it. You'll see it's actually quite extensive in order to create something that looks that nice. But again, this is just exported from Illustrator. But what we're here is I'm just hosting WPF, or WPFE, excuse me, in the browser. And what this is doing is it's pointing to that XAML page, loading and running it in the browser. And then I have some controls on here that allow me to use WPFE's ability to do scaling and rotating. And I'm using actually JavaScript, again, to hook up to this slider such that when I go ahead and move the slider, I get a JavaScript event, and then I call into, using our JavaScript programming model, call into our tree, DOM, and I go ahead and change the scale on this vector image. And so it allows me to do things such as scroll around here and be able to really move in on the vectors. The beauty of vectors, you can see here, is if you tried this with an image, obviously you couldn't keep this level of fidelity, but with vectors you do get that. So I can scale it out as well, and then also you get the advantage of I can go ahead and rotate this as well, make it a little smaller, and I can rotate it like this again with really no loss in fidelity at all, since it is just vectors ultimately that I'm dealing with. Okay, and then let's see, I want to move on to one more demo here. I got a video demo. So another thing that we support is media in WPFE. And so one of the nice things about this is, and the markup-based model or the XAML-based model with the JavaScript integration, is how easy it is to then add video to your page. And this is, again, video that will run everywhere. It will run on Safari on a Mac. It will run in Firefox, as well as it will run on IE. And all I have to do in order to add this is the same thing that I showed you before, is I'm going to go ahead and add my object embed tag. And I'm going to do this. In this case, I've added a script block with JavaScript. So rather than using the ASP.NET control, we also have a JavaScript library that does the same thing that the ASP.NET control does, which is just injects some JavaScript into the page that sniffs out the browser type and puts in the object or embed tag. And then I'm going to go ahead and directly in my page, I'm going to add some XAML. And in the XAML, I'm going to put a media element, and I'm going to point it to, in this case, I'll point it to ski, which is a video that I have down in here. And we'll go ahead and run this page. And I did that again. I'm going to go ahead and run that page. And you'll see here, just really easy with a couple lines of markup, I'm able to quickly put my page or my video in there. This is actually taken from a North Face sample here. Those are, what you're seeing there is actually sort of snapping at or stopping at the buzz shot. It's not actually the video being choppy there. But again, just to show you how easy it is for me to go ahead and quickly add video content to the page, if I wanted to play a different video. So for example, suppose in this case, I have an ad that I thought was humorous and I wanted to publish it on my blog or website. How easy would it be to do something like that? Well, really all it is I put this in my web page, and I can add some markup directly in my web page, and I can go ahead and run, and boy, you think, fool me once, what is that? Let's run it again. Go ahead, and this time I can just point to a different video, so you can see easily. One of the advantages we have is you can dynamically generate this stuff. You can easily feed, and you guys probably don't want to see
It's very creative.
What a day at my work is like. I'm just joking, really. But it just shows you how easy it is to be able to do something like add video to your web page, but also since it's all just markup-based, it makes it really easy to do things such as dynamically generate this content. So on the server, whether you want to dynamically generate or spit up a banner ad, or you want to do content that's based on who the user is that's currently logged on, and you want more richer interactive content, this model makes it really easy to generate that sort of thing on the server. Now, of course, we do more than just the markup in the page, which is what I want to talk about next. So what I showed you there was sort of the really easy, just if you're a web developer and you want to find something that's really approachable, do something that's very approachable to the web developers, that's kind of what you would do. You just put markup in the page and you script against it using JavaScript. But in cases where you're building more professional apps or maybe you're building more sophisticated type controls, you may want to use a richer programming language, or if you have maybe a bunch of assets associated with your website and you want to be able to bundle up those assets such as media and video and images up into a package and have that package delivered to our control versus being able to just have inline XAML, you can do that as well. And that's what I want to talk about next, is that in addition to this XAML JavaScript model, we also support a .NET Framework model. And I want to be clear on what it means to say .NET Framework model. What it really means is that we have a small, as part of our runtime, we have a small, what I'll call IL, or Intermediate Language Engine, that we ship in there. But really all it is just a little execution engine that allows us to do things such as, or allows developers to write C# or VB.NET code rather than JavaScript. And what you do is that you, when you're developing an application and you want to, instead of doing JavaScript, you want to program against C#, you would compile that into something called IL. That IL would then be sent down in a package. Rather than using the loose XAML like we've done before, it would actually be sent down to our runtime. You basically externally reference this package that contained IL and, for example, loose XAML, and then our runtime will run that versus the loose XAML that I showed you before. So I have some examples, not demos, but some examples that kind of show how that works. So from the external package standpoint, before I was showing you sort of an object or embed tag that pointed to a XAML island within my page. Well, instead of doing that, I can go ahead and just reference an external package, in this case, default.wpfe. And default.wpfe may contain default.xaml file. In this case, it will, because I've said that's the default page in that package. But it can also contain other things, such as images, media, fonts, anything else you might want to package up as part of that application, if you will. So that's just the standard. I want to just take XAML itself and package it up. But again, you can do the same thing with the .NET programming model as well. And that's what this is showing, is that I can have an external sample.wpfe file. And rather than using JavaScript in the browser to program against it, in here I can actually have an IL file associated with it. And how that would look is, in this case, I have my sample.xaml, which similar to what I showed you before. In this case, I have a button, and the button is actually part of the XAML. It is our WPFE button. And if you want to program against it, in this case, I'm showing a sample of programming against it using C#. I'm adding a button click event here. What ends up happening is that we take that XAML, we take the C# file below, we compile it up into one package, and that package is set down as what you see here as the sample.wpfe. So rather than having the loose XAML in the page, instead you have a package, and that package contains your loose XAML and your IL code, which is really C# or VB.NET code. One last thing that I want to touch on here is in terms of WPFE controls. I haven't showed a lot of WPFE controls in my demos. Currently, we're at the state where we're just adding interactivity, and we're just building up our control model. All the demos I showed you today were real demos, as in there are real code base. It wasn't anything that was mocked up per se. What we don't have yet is we don't have our control and styling library, so I do want to talk about that a little bit since I can't show a demo of it. But we will have a really rich styling and control library. And what I mean by that is, if you've seen the WPF styling capabilities, we'll support that same level of styling, which gives you a real rich ability to change the look of a button without having to redefine the behavior of a button. And this is just showing a quick example of two different buttons that are just styled differently. And in this case, styled in interesting ways. And the top one has this radial gradient in it. And these are actually XAML samples that were done using WPF. But we'll support the exact same thing using WPFE. But the key thing is I can completely change the look of my button. I can add, whether I want to add images or even video content within my button, it still stays a button. All I'm doing is just changing the style. I'm not changing the behavior. So it's a really powerful model that we'll support in WPFE. Now, before I get to questions and feedback, I do want to get to a couple more demos that I had. And I didn't show text, so I do want to show text. And one of the things that I have to do when I run text, which is why I wanted to save it for last, is I'm going to bring down VS and bring it back up. And the reason I'm doing that is because, as I told you originally, I actually have two versions of our runtime. I had the original version of the runtime that was in the cab file, and then I had the updated version of the runtime that I ran most of my demos on. Well, it also turns out that the real version of the runtime, the one that's in the cab file, actually has better tech support, and so I want to show you that. And so I'm bringing it up again to go ahead and load the original version, and we'll wait for VS here real quickly. Thank you. Change my screen. You can't see what I'm looking at. There we go. Should do it. Okay. And then go ahead and bring this back up again. So again, that's from my previous restart here, just to make it clear. Nope, I don't want to send him an error. Text, like controls, like our 2D and vector stuff, text is a first-class citizen in our framework. And so what it means is that since it's a first-class citizen, I can do all the tricks with text that I showed you before with just the 2D vector stuff, which is I can use special brushes to paint the text. I can use animations on it. And so I have a simple little demo here that shows that as soon as VS comes back. There we go. And I have a text file here, and I just want to show you the text file here real quick. And all this is I've got a little text screen in it, and I'm drawing on it with a gradient paintbrush, and I put it at an angle, so that's what it looks like. And really the XAML is fairly straightforward. In this case, here's my text, and I'm just drawing in it using a brush. So instead of just using a set foreground or background, I can have any brush that I want, again, to just draw in my text. So if I go ahead and run this sample, you'll see it not running. And that's because I didn't run that. And I just ran the old framework again, and it's not my day today. What's that? I'm gonna jump to the north face, which is the last demo that I want to do. And after I'm done here, please feel free to come up, and I will get those demos running. So I'll set this as start page. The last thing I want to do is I want to show a demo of kind of putting everything together in this North Face sample here. And what we've done here is this is just North Face's, it's a page off the North Face website that I've got running locally. And what I want to do is I want to show some of the concepts that I showed earlier and be able to take some assets that were generated using Interactive Designer. And these were assets that are being used in the North Face kiosk site. And I want to be able to take those and leverage them on my customer-facing or consumer-facing website, or in North Face's consumer-facing website. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to start with by going into the design view here of North Face. And I do have a little animation here, and this actually came directly from the North Face kiosk application, and it's a designer put it together. And what it does is I can go ahead and scrub the timeline here, and you go ahead and see this means the wind bounces off the fabric, and then the rain cannot repel, and it breathes. Wonderful, huh? So there's it running. I'm going to take that animation, which is in this XAML file called fabric.xaml, and I want to go ahead and add it to this page. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go ahead and drop in the ASP.NET control that I showed you earlier. I'm going to go ahead and drop it in here, and I'm going to make it windowless, set the background to transparent. And so this is kind of showing you what the normal, maybe the developer workflow would be. Design would go ahead and give them some XAML, and they'd go ahead and incorporate it where they wanted to on the page. And in this case, I will do fabric.xaml and save that. And I do want to go ahead and make sure I'm using the latest version of our runtime and go ahead and run it. And come in under here, and there you can go ahead and see that in this case, that you see the transparent background, so it shows through. So I was able to quickly take that asset that was given to me by a designer and go ahead and put it on my website my consumer or customer-facing website. Now, I want to go ahead and do something similar, but this time I want to go ahead and add a little interactivity to my content. So again, I've got assets. In this case, the assets are basically some image slices of a jacket, and here's a background. This is my XAML that the designer gave me. But really what the designer gave me was they went ahead and put together this jacket, and they gave me a simple screen, but they also gave me a bunch of image slices and that do a 360-degree rotation, and it's up to me as the developer to go ahead and put it on the site and hook everything up so I get a nice 360-degree rotation out of it. So again, I'm going to go back to my North Face, and first thing I want to do is go ahead and drop in my ASP.NET control again and do the same thing. I'm going to give it XAML, which is the rotate.xaml. And again, I'm going to make it windowless and transparent. And we also have a mechanism by which when our control, when the WPF control that's hosted in the web page, when it's done initializing, it can go ahead and call back in to the web browser. In this case, it's going to call a JavaScript function called init control when it's done initializing. And what this allows me to do is write some JavaScript code when it initializes that go ahead and set some initial information. For example, the initial image, or maybe I want to start some animations or some scripting against the control, which is what I'm going to do in this case. So I want to go ahead and size that, make it the right size. Let's see, it's about right. And I'll go ahead and run it just to show you what it looks like. And so there you go ahead and see it now. I'll go ahead and show you the XAML. I don't know how well it comes out, but you see a nice little fog effect going in the background there, where you can see the, looks like the jacket's really up on the mountain. You kind of get the feeling you're Sir Edmund Hillary or somebody like that. That's the goal anyway. Maybe I missed the target. Go ahead and you see you get the nice little rotation here, and I'm going to show you how that was done. That's actually JavaScript programming against our DOM. And I also get the nice effect here where I can go ahead and swap out colors on the fly. That, anybody know what color that is? It's Web 2.0 is what I was told. No, okay. Okay, I don't have a life as a presenter or as a comedian. Okay, anyway, back to the demo. So I want to show you how that JavaScript was, thank you. Thank you. I had my mom sitting in the front, my dad's in the back, so thanks. So let's go ahead and show you how that was wired up. So I called that the init control function, and really what I'm really doing here is I have a DHTML slider control on there. I'll go ahead and run it so you can see it. So there's this DHTML slider control right here, and as I move the slider control, all it's doing is it's giving me a callback, and in that callback, I'm going ahead and programming against the brush that's defined in my markup, which I'll show you right here. So in my markup, I have defined in my XAML, I've defined a brush called jacket, and the brush, as I was telling you before, that brushes are very powerful things, and that you can have gradient and solid color brushes, of course, but in this case I have an image brush. So all I'm doing is I'm drawing effectively with an image, and in this case I'm drawing with the first image in a slice of images that make up this 360-degree rotation. And all I'm doing in my scripting here is, as I change the slider value, I'm just going ahead and changing the image path of that brush to just go ahead and pick a different image in the slice, and that creates this nice little 3D type illusion in this case. But again, it's just to show you how easy it is to mix our web programming model with our markup model or our XAML model in this case. And so one other thing I want to show you on that sample is, so in this case I can run these two animations, but also got to throw in the gratuitous video again. So just to show you, so I've got multiple islands running in here. At the same time, I've got the video stream running. So just multiple islands all running on the same page at the same time. And I can do the same thing on, let's go ahead and run it on Firefox, just to show you that it works there as well. And this will pop up soon. And I'm going to show it as well. I'm going to while I'm doing that, there it is, running on Firefox. And the fog effect, by the way, if anybody's interested, that it looks, if you want to come up and look at it, it looks pretty interesting, but really what that is just a couple PNGs that basically have, they're basically partially transparent, kind of cloud-like PNGs, and they're just at separate angles, and they're just kind of animating their opacity and angles over each other all at the same time to give this sort of pseudo-random effect, this, or as some people like to say, organic feel, for what that's worth. Just trying to keep up on the buzzwords. It's probably last year's buzzword, but that's as good as I can do. So let's go to the Mac here, and show you the same thing running there as well. And so here's the same app running on the Mac, and you can see the same thing. I've got that nice little feel. Here's my animation for that as well. So again, we've got it working on all three fronts. Thank you. And with that, two things. One, please remember to fill out your evals. I'll do Q&A in just a minute. Any of the demos, I'm sorry about the technical difficulties. Anybody who wants to see the demos working up here, please feel free afterwards, come up. I'll show you everything working and all those samples correctly. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and take questions. Thank you. Go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about your planned device support? I mean, is it going to be outside the browser or inside?
The question is about our planned device support. So we will have device support in the second half of 07. That will be it'll be something that's synergistic with .NET CF type solution. So it'll be an outside the browser solution. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Hey, thanks, Joe. I'd like to make sure that I'm straight on the languages we're using here. We have XAML for layout. We have CSS for styling. For WPFE, we have HTML for the basic page. Then on the interactivity, for WPFE, we can use JavaScript on any system which has a WPFE plugin. You could use C# if you're doing standalone beyond the browser XAML work. But you can also use C# if you're doing, excuse me. Is that in the browser C# work? Does that have a browser and operating system dependency?
No. So the question is,
because that uses.
I'll touch on the C# one, the last one you asked. So I want to make sure I touch on that. So I believe the question is there any limitations on the, effectively, if I can paraphrase, are there any limitations on the C# usage? Is it browser dependent or even OS dependent? And it's not. Our runtime has an IL engine as part of it, and our runtime is portable and runs on all platforms. So what that means is that you can write C#, and the one thing is the C# is compiled into IL, but that IL is then can be taken to any platform, and that's actually what our runtime understands as IL. Now the advantage of C# and VB.NET is they both compile into IL. So we can use standard C# and VB compilers. You can compile that into IL. That becomes part of our package, and that runs everywhere. That'll run on the Mac, on Safari, or it'll run on IE, or run on Netscape. Your other question, or one thing that you did ask too, was about CSS. CSS works with HTML. WPF-E supports the WPF styling model, but it supports a different styling model than CSS. So we have a styling model, it's just not CSS styling
Right, that makes sense. Thank you. One last wrinkle in there is for WPFE in the browser using JavaScript as the interactivity engine. Do messages from the plugin to the browser, are they caught by regular JavaScript or JScript or VBScript? Because ActiveX controls are usually, their messages are usually caught by VBScript. Thanks.
So the question is how are the messages sent from the control back through to the browser?
Yeah, and what language is used in the browser to catch those ActiveX messages?
So it's whatever scripting language is supported by the browser. So typically that'd be JavaScript.
Cool, thanks.
Sure.
So question on the IL support. Is it standard IL or some odd flavor of IL? Because I know Microsoft has a tendency to always throw out C# and VB when they're talking about .NET, but there are other languages like IronPython, Ruby.NET, other things that emit IL. Will there be support for languages beyond those two?
Yes, so the question is, will there be support for other languages other than C# and VB.NET? And really, I think the crux of your question is about what does it mean to support IL? And in a sense, other languages may have their own runtimes associated with them. So, for example, the IronPython work, IronPython has its own runtime, and that runtime is or its own class libraries, if you will. But those class libraries are tied to the IronPython work currently is tied to Microsoft platform using Microsoft APIs. But we have a IL engine, and that IL engine understands IL, but in a sense, there's another set of framework-based class libraries that are all actually tied to the Windows system. We don't support that. We just support being able to run IL, which means you can take any C# standard C# constructs and use them, program against our DOM, so standard if, while, that sort of thing. And we'll have simple base class libraries as well. But as long as you stick to those class libraries and that C#, it'll work. It just compiles down into IL, and that IL is the same IL that you use on the .NET framework. It's the same IL everywhere, but it's just when you're using the .NET framework as a whole, typically in there you'll have references to class libraries that only exist on the .NET framework. We can't resolve those because we haven't taken those class libraries to all platforms.
Right. So in other words, languages that basically stay pure in the IL world and stick to the subset of the class library that you have and aren't doing like p invokes for platform support, things like that. Theoretically, you should be able to support languages other than C#
right.
if they're emitted to pure IL in the subset you have.
Yes, if they don't have, and most languages do have their own specific platform-specific runtime. So if you do have any dependencies on the platform-specific runtime, you need to obviously port that platform-specific runtime to use our APIs.
Other question I know someone was asking is, when do we get to see it? When's it ship?
We'll have a CTP third quarter this year, and it'll be first quarter 2007. We'll have bits available for release.
Right. Thank you.
Did I say first quarter? I meant first half. Sorry. Don't write that down. Did I say first half? I meant second half. No, that's just a joke, really. That is. Really, sorry. Go ahead.
I think we're all trying to get a feeling for how big the breadbox is here, so I'm going to ask it a couple different ways. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see what is the subset that's in WFE versus WF?
What's the subset? What's our feature set?
Right.
So we support, let's go ahead and, if I can figure out which one of these. It is 2D text. Here, well, you can read it, but really I think what you're asking is what are some of the key things that aren't in there? WPF supports 3D. Some of the things that won't make our first release are things like 3D. WPF has a full rich document stack. We won't have that. WPF, when you think of WPF, you're really thinking of the whole WinFX stack, which is it has the rich web services library, and it's got Windows Forms as part of that, and it's got GDI or GDI Plus as part of that, or system.drawing. So there's a bunch of things that are part of that that we won't support, but that's the full WinFX stack in a sense. We'll have essentially this subset here, and we'll have some simple class libraries that allow you to do things such as talk to web services, obviously allow you to interact with our DOM, allow you to do XML parsing, those sorts of types of libraries.
I've just got a couple of questions. First off, for the plugin, what sort of penetration are you guys aiming for? When do you think you'll reach that? And the other question was a bit more technical. Can the islands communicate between themselves directly or through some sort of intermediary? And finally, the plugin size. Is there something you're aiming for? And what region will that be in?
Okay, so my memory's short, so I'm going to take them in the reverse order. Okay. What was the first question? What was the third question? No, I'm just joking. Maybe. Maybe I'm not trying to answer the questions. The third question was about the runtime size and what are we aiming for. We'll ship 2 megs or less is what our goal is for the runtime size. The second question was whether or not we can interact between the two different controls, and you can use something like, you'd have to use JavaScript in a sense to interact between the two. So you'd basically have that to be your glue between the separate sets of controls. And the first question.
Penetration. What sort of penetration are you aiming for, and how long do you think it'll take to reach that?
So our goal in terms of penetration is to work with folks to be able to find some ship vehicles for us so that we can get penetration. In terms of specific goals for when we expect to have what we call ubiquity, we're still working on our rollout plan and still working on our partners. So at this point in time, I wish I'd give you more information, but I don't. Our goal is we want to be aggressive. We want to find as many partners as we can quickly to drive ubiquity. But I'll give you more details. Probably the next time you hear me speaking about this, I should have more details on that.
Thank you.
Sure. Go ahead.
I'm wondering what your support is for things like screen readers for accessibility, and then also for like search engine spidering, if they'll be able to spider any content, that sort of thing.
So the first question about accessibility is that on Microsoft platforms will be MSAA compliant for accessibility, and we take accessibility extremely seriously. And then for other platforms, Macintosh platform, which we'll do whatever's appropriate on the Macintosh platform to make sure that we're accessible there as well. In terms of searching, so one of the nice things about our markup model is it is text-based, so it is searchable. Now, the way that I showed it today, it was in a script block, and so there are some issues with search engines searching the script blocks themselves, but we have had related to actually for WPF, not WPFE specifically, but we have had conversations with some of the search engine companies about how to make our content searchable. So it is something we're aware of, and it is something that we think with our text-based model that'll be more easy for us to get search engines to be able to search our content.
Thanks.
Hey there, where does this leave SVG? Do we have another VHS versus Betamax?
Where does this leave SVG? Well, I think the way that I view it is that from the standpoint of our technology, we just think it's important for us to have this unified stack and to have commonality with what WPF does. So we're building on this whole ecosystem thing. But we look at it from the standpoint of when we built this, we knew that it was important for us to have 2D. It had to be there to give us scalability, to be able to work across devices as well as work in situations on the web where you basically want your app to be able to scale. And we wanted that to be unified with our control platform and layout and those sorts of things and media. So we looked at it as it was more of something that was necessary for us to do in order to get the platform capabilities we needed. And so I'm a little bit at a loss to say how does SVG fit into that, because that's not the angle that we were attacking it from. It was more of this is just what we need for our platform to work. And we thought it was a key piece for our platform to work. And so I'm not sure I answered your question, but anyway, that's my answer.
Thank you.
How would you go about programming this? Let's just say, for example, you have two pull-down menus inside the GUI there, and you pick one, and then it posts back to the server to populate the other one. But you do it dynamically, like you would with Atlas or Ajax or something like that.
So within our programming model, you'll have the same sort of eventing model that you're used to with, or similar eventing model in HTML, but it'll be a similar model if you're familiar with WPF, or if you've done any sort of managed code programming or any sort of client-side programming. Is we'll have an eventing model that says, you click on something, you get an event back from that event, you go ahead and write code. You could do it in JavaScript, but something like that, you'd probably more likely choose something like C#, where you'd use our libraries to go ahead and talk back to a web service, and based on the contents of that web service, you could generate some new content and either do something where you interact with our DOM to change the UI, or maybe refresh an island within your WPFE application, something like that. But you'll have a programming model like what you're used to, or DOM, that you can program against in C# or JavaScript that's similar to what you've got today in HTML, or similar to what WPF has. So it'll be that type of programming model. Go ahead.
Hi, I have two questions. First one, will the user has to have admin privileges to install the plugin? And second one, does your IL runtime support calling of web services independent of the operating system it's running on?
So the first one, will we require admin privileges for the install? Our goal is not to require admin privileges for the install. However, I'll just leave it as that is our goal today, is that we do not want to require admin privileges for the install. And I was so busy thinking about your first question. Will we support web services? So we will have a simple stack that allows you to talk to web services. We've been looking at whether or not we want to do some sort of JSON support, but at a minimum, you'll be able to call through to a web service. We think it'll be limited initially, and this is one of these things, we'd love people's feedback on it, to same server access. Although we're trying to think of ways that we could widen that out, but we will have a stack that allows you to talk to web services within our runtime. Go ahead.
2 questions. The first one is, in the actual plugin itself, does that include the IL interpreter, or is that just the WPF and WPFE? The other question is, because you'll have WPF, WPFE as you know, you have a subset essentially. Is there going to be anything in place in the visual tools and the developer tools to show you, hey, this is something for WPFE, this is something that's WPF, you can't use this in WPFE, make it really clear what's usable in which?
Yep. Yeah, so in relationship to the first question, the IL engine is part of our runtime. There's no separation between the two. It's just when you get our runtime and you download and install it, you get the IL engine with it. The tools experience, we are looking at a targeted tools experience that targets either WPF or will have a targeted tools experience for WPFE. What that means is that you will have something that clearly says, here are the things you can do in WPF, and here are the things you can do in WPFE. But ultimately, it'll be more tailored towards, we'll have an environment or a profile that is a WPFE profile. So you'll be having a WPFE project, and it'll be geared towards doing web development kind of things. And on your WPF project, you'll do rich client kinds of things.
That actually just brought up one more question, sorry. Will there be, is there an extension model in place for this, for adding features to it, kind of like what Director has?
So, from the tool standpoint or from the runtime standpoint?
From the runtime standpoint.
So the question is about an extension model. We will have some mechanism by which you can do subclassing so that you can create your own controls. We want to make sure that we're careful about that, and that we will have a few key extensibility points as our target or goal. We know that people need to develop their own controls. We know people need to extend the framework. How much we allow you to extend it, or in what places we allow you to extend it, will be tightly controlled. Initially, we'll probably have a base control, and we'll allow you to extend a base control. Will we allow you to do your own custom layout? It's something that we're considering, but it's those kinds of things that we're still working through. We want to really make sure we target the scenarios where we do give you extensibility. So yes, you'll have extensibility. It's one of those things that as we get the product out there, we'll get feedback in terms of where we need the extensibility points. But we will have some, but also our goal is that we want to reduce or limit the amount of extensibility we put in the product, just so that we can continue to support and maintain the product in the future.
Thank you.
I have 3 questions. The first one would be, does that mean I can access some of the .NET class libraries from inside this?
So we'll have a separate set of class libraries that are part of, or I don't even say a separate set of class libraries. We'll have a small set of libraries that you can use with WPFE. But as far as the .NET framework libraries that ship in 1.0, 1.1, or 2.0, those libraries are a separate set of libraries. Now, the compilers associated with that will be able, you can use those compilers to generate RIL, but the libraries you use or you target with those compilers are our set of libraries. That's what they use.
Number 2, are there any debugging capabilities?
So from the IL standpoint, you'll be able to use the standard IL or .NET-based debuggers to debug against it. And for JavaScript debugging, you'll get the JavaScript debuggers that you know and love today. And shouldn't be a problem for anybody.
The last one was, as you showed, XAML can create pretty big file sizes for just simple vector graphics. If I package everything into a WPFE file, do I get any kind of gain?
So we have a couple things when you package in a WPFE file. One is that we've been investigating a mechanism to take our XAML itself, still keep it in ASCII format or binary or text format, to be able to compress that down such that you can make it much smaller. And then on top of that, we put it in a cab file, so it's compressed up and beyond that as well. And we've seen reasonable compression that way. We're also considering doing a binary compression up and beyond that if we find out that we need that. At this point in time, what we've seen is that we haven't found it necessary yet to go down the binary compression route, but again, we'll continue to look at it, and if we feel or find that we need to do binary compression to get the kind of small size that we need in order to ship these packages over the internet, then we'll do that as well.
Thank you.
Actually, that was my question.
Great.
All right.
Okay.
Is WPFE going to be royalty-free open specification?
So open specification, royalty-free. So of course the runtime, will be available for free, as in it's, you put it on your web page, you won't have to pay any royalties or anything. Of course, anybody can host it anywhere and just use the runtime for free. In terms of licensing models around, if you want to take WPFE and host it in your client application, or you want to take our source code and extend it or port it to a Linux system or some other system, that's something that we're working on. We will have a licensing model around that. We're still working on the details associated with that, but I don't have details at this point in time on that.
Well, I mean, suppose that someone wanted to go implement the spec on a different device using their own code. Is that going to be possible?
So if you want to implement the XAML specification, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
If you want to take our XAML subset and implement it, I'm going to have to defer that question in case does anybody want to answer it over to my left? Okay.
Okay, thanks.
So the answer is we're investigating.
Joe,
Sorry.
Joe, have business cards given to you and we can follow up.
Okay. Thank you, Forrest. So go ahead and drop your business card off when you're done. If I had a question that you didn't like my answer, please come up, drop me your business card, and I will have Forrest give you an answer.
The question is, what for in this engine micro framework? Why you are using micro.NET framework inside this engine? Because on this sample, I can see the JavaScript running outside of the engine, right?
Yep.
So you are using the JavaScript from the browser.
That's right.
So will this engine include JavaScript engine also with this IL?
So our JavaScript programming model leverages the JavaScript engine in the browser. We have another programming model that allows you to use C# or VB.NET or JScript.NET, for example, to program against it as well, and that's the IL model. So you can,
The thing is, okay, so when this invocation of this internal code, which like WPF application, let's say application, it contains some code inside, right?
Yep.
Markup and code. So when invocation of this code happens, actually, we've seen on the example, on the samples that it uses browser scripting model, right?
Right.
So you have special model inside the engine, right?
That's right. So we
haven't seen this here.
That's right. So yeah, to be clear, the only example I showed, we haven't integrated our .NET or our IL engine in. We've prototyped and have a prototype sample of the two working together, but the bits I showed today don't include the IL engine as part of it.
Okay.
So I showed you the outside, or the JavaScript programming model. The only inside programming model that I showed, if you will, was I just showed the sample up on the screen of how the code would look that would come across as a package where the IL would be part of the package, and we would execute that IL that's in the package.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I know that WPF uses Windows Media Player under the hood to do video playback. Is WPFE using that on Windows, and what's it going to use on the Mac?
So that's a good question. So what we've done is we actually have a separate video stack delivered by the same folks who delivered basically Windows Media Player, that they have created a separate WMV, WMA stack for us, and that's a portable stack that runs across, that'll be part of our runtime, the same as the IL engine, that will be included in our runtime, and that'll be cross-browser, cross-platform, or really cross-platform runtime. So we do have a separate stack that handles our media, audio and video.
Cool.
Is that it? One more? Two more?
Yeah.
Okay. 3 more? Go ahead.
What's the security model here? Are we following settings from like Casball, or are we using IE settings, or what?
So for V1, our goal is that our security model is always sandboxed. We don't provide any elevation. We don't provide anything that is inherently unsafe, which means we don't provide access to standard things like, of course, file system, but we don't even provide access to being able to go back to any server that's not yours. So we provide only same domain server access. So that's our V1 model. Again, we're looking for feedback. If we find out we need to open that at all, we may open it and provide not a CAS model, but I'll say a binary or vertical model where we might provide specific permissions that enable certain things, like being able to store cookies locally or be able to access web services that don't reside from the same domain, those sorts of things. So we're considering it, but at this point in time, our goal is still to have a sort of always sandboxed environment.
Okay. And kind of a follow-up. I noticed that everywhere you wrote managed code, you had it in quotes. So is this really just kind of like an IL scripting engine, or is it garbage collected and all the usual things that we expect from managed code?
Yes, it is. It's an IL scripting engine that's garbage collected and GC'd and supports JIT and is verified and all those wonderful things that people who know managed code adore.
Okay, so it is managed code then?
Yeah, it is. It's an IL scripting engine, as you described. So
okay.
The programming environment is C#, so yes, it is managed code from that standpoint.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
I was wondering, if this runtime is running on Windows, will you use a hardware acceleration, or is it GDI?
So the question is, do we use hardware acceleration or GDI? The answer is that we don't use GDI, or initially in V1, we're currently not, our goal is, or our thought is we won't hardware accelerate on Windows platforms, but we have our own rendering engine that basically handles everything at a low level, but we are independent of GDI on Windows. Okay.
Well,
go ahead. I guess, how much time do I have? 3 minutes.
Will audio and video support DRM?
Great question. Will audio and video support DRM? It's something that we're looking at. It's not currently on our V1, definitely in feature lists, as in it's not something that we're willing to hold up V1 for. It is something we're considering. At this point in time, I can't give you a firm yes or no whether or not DRM will be part of our V1 package, though.
I have a simple follow-up question on performance. Do you plan to equalize performance across the platforms that you will support?
So our goal is to have consistent performance across all platforms.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much.